Today, the war in Ukraine has taken a new turn, not on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has once again made headlines, this time for calling out Russia's latest peace delegation as nothing more than, quote, decorative, a sharp, cutting remark that is already sparking debate around the world. But what does that actually mean? Why would Ukraine's president use such a dismissive word during what should have been a major step toward peace? And more importantly, what does this say about the state of negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv? Let's break this down. On May 15th, President Zelenskyy landed in Istanbul, Turkey. The visit was framed as historic, the first direct talks between Ukraine and Russia in 3 years. For weeks, speculation had been building that this could be a serious attempt to find common ground. After years of war, bloodshed, and destruction, maybe, just maybe, there was an opening. But those hopes didn't last long. Ukraine sent its delegation, led by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, a significant figure, but not one with the final say, on peace. And when the Russians arrived, eyebrows immediately raised. Instead of President Vladimir Putin, instead of Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, instead of anyone who could actually sign off on a ceasefire, Moscow sent a much lower-level team. Heading the Russian side was Vladimir Medinsky, a presidential aide, a name not widely known outside Russia, and more importantly, a man without the authority to make binding decisions. That's when Zelenskyy made his move. Speaking publicly, he dismissed the entire Russian delegation as decorative. In other words, they were there for show, for the optics, for the photographs, not for peace. And that word, decorative, hit harder than any prepared diplomatic statement. It instantly reframed the talks, painting Russia's presence not as sincere, but as hollow. Let's pause on that for a second. Imagine this. You're at a table supposedly negotiating the end of a brutal war. Lives are being lost every single day. Entire towns destroyed, millions displaced. And across from you sits a team that can't even authorize a single concession. How do you respond? For Zelenskyy, the answer was clear. You call it out. And by doing so, he's not just talking to Russia. He's talking to the world. Because here's the truth. Diplomacy only works when both sides actually want it to. When both sides send people with the power to decide. Without that, talks are little more than theater. And that's exactly the impression these Istanbul meetings gave. Theater. A showpiece designed to send a message to international observers. Look, we're talking. But behind the curtain, nothing real was on the table. Meanwhile, back in Ukraine, the war hasn't paused for diplomacy. Fighting continues daily. Artillery duels, drone strikes, deadly clashes along the front lines. Civilians are still suffering, and soldiers are still dying. So when Zelenskyy brands the talks decorative, he's pointing out the cruel contrast. While Moscow stages peace performances abroad, its military presses forward at home. Now, let's zoom out. Why Turkey? Why Istanbul? Turkey has long positioned itself as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. Ankara maintains strong ties with Moscow, buying Russian gas, even defense systems, but also supports Kyiv, selling drones and offering humanitarian aid. President Erdogan has tried before to act as a bridge, a neutral ground where both sides could sit down. But here's the catch. When one side treats the talks as a PR stunt, Turkey's role risks looking less like a peacemaker and more like a stage manager for a hollow play. And Zelenskyy knows that. His decorative comment was not only aimed at Russia but also at Turkey, and even at Ukraine's Western allies. The message: don't get fooled, don't mistake appearances for progress. So let's ask the real question. What does this mean for peace? Because peace talks aren't just about optics. They're about trust, compromise, and, most importantly, authority. Without authority at the table, nothing can change. And right now, authority is exactly what's missing. Zelenskyy is effectively saying, if you want peace, bring someone who can actually deliver it. If Putin won't sit down himself, then at least send someone empowered to negotiate. Otherwise, don't waste our time, and that leads us to the stakes. For Ukraine, every delay costs lives. Every superficial meeting without progress means more soldiers lost, more civilians displaced, more cities reduced to rubble. For Russia, these staged delegations risk making Moscow look weak. If you're serious about ending a war, why send aides and not leaders? What are you afraid of committing to? And for the international community, this moment sends a warning. Diplomacy in Ukraine is stuck in neutral. Without genuine effort from both sides, no ceasefire, no truce, no peace plan. Stands a chance, but here's the twist. Zelenskyy's blunt language may actually serve a deeper purpose. By publicly dismissing Russia's team, he's applying pressure. Pressure on Moscow to send real negotiators. Pressure on Turkey to demand more serious engagement. Pressure on Ukraine's allies to recognize that patience is running thin. It's a calculated move, and it puts Russia in a corner. Because now, if Moscow continues sending low-level delegations, they look unserious. They look deceptive. And the world sees it. So, where do things go from here? Will Russia step up and send a stronger team? Will Putin himself ever sit across from Zelenskyy? Or will Moscow keep hiding behind what Ukraine calls decorative gestures? And if talks stall, what does that mean for the battlefield? Some analysts suggest Ukraine will double down on military action, backed by Western aid, rather than waiting for phantom negotiations. Others believe Russia may use these staged talks to buy time, regroup, and reframe the narrative for its own. People. Either way, the reality is this. As long as peace talks are symbolic, the war continues. Let's not forget, though, wars don't end without diplomacy. Every conflict eventually finds its way to a table, but those tables only matter when the people sitting around them have the authority and the will to sign the deal. Right now, that's not the case, and Zelenskyy wants the world to see that clearly. So, as we close, here's the bigger picture. This war isn't just about tanks and trenches. It's about perception, legitimacy, credibility. When Ukraine's president calls Russia's delegation decorative, he's cutting to the heart of it. Peace cannot be achieved through performance. It must be achieved through power, through compromise, and through genuine intent. Until then, the fighting continues. The waiting continues. And the world is left asking the same question Zelenskyy asked with just one word. Is this real? Or is it all just for show? That's where things stand today. Ukraine demands substance. Russia offers symbolism. Turkey hosts the stage. And the rest of the world watches closely, wondering if this moment was a step toward peace, or just another reminder of how far peace still is.